the absolute, unconditioned reality. The world of our everyday experience consists of the various things we sense and interact with, including external objects and our own bodies. We also experience an internal world of thoughts and feelings. To experience any of these things requires the presence of consciousness. How many thoughts, feelings, or experiences could we have apart from consciousness? This is a simple point that is usually overlooked. In non-duality, primacy is given to consciousness as the basic fact of experience. In fact, at the level of appearances, consciousness is what you are, because it is the only continuously present factor in our experience. The world, mind, and body appear as objects within consciousness. They have no independent existence apart from being perceived in consciousness. To overlook one's real position as the conscious knowing presence and identify oneself with the body is due to a basic misunderstanding, a conceptual error. The body is an object that appears in consciousness. You are the one to whom it appears. Essentially, the body, mind, and world are fleeting and insubstantial appearances coming and going within consciousness. Relatively speaking, consciousness is more enduring, more substantial, and more real than the appearances. Because most of us are ignorantly identified as the body and mind, a first step in clarifying our identity is to see our identity as consciousness rather than any of the objects of consciousness. Because objects only exist in consciousness and have no independent reality, we can view them as manifestations or appearances of consciousness, much as waves have no independent reality but are only appearances of the underlying water which is their substratum. In the wave analogy, all that is present is water. The wave is just a label for something that appears but has no independent existence as a thing apart from its source. In terms of consciousness, this means that the objects, body, mind, and world, do not exist as independent realities as such. It is consciousness alone that exists. This means that there has never been an actual independent body, mind, or world at all. All of those things are only appearances of consciousness. All that is truly present in and through all experiencing is consciousness alone. Consciousness itself is not a continuous or unchanging experience in and of itself. In waking and dreaming, consciousness is present, but in deep sleep, we do not experience the fact of being conscious. It is not that we disappear, for some presence or essence continues as the backdrop of sleep, and that something subsequently experiences the re-emergence of consciousness and its objects. From this perspective, we can view consciousness itself as an experience that comes and goes. It is only after the appearance of consciousness that we experience the body, mind, and world. These are experienced within consciousness. Who or what experiences the arising and setting of consciousness? Consider the moment before consciousness emerges. No objects are present. There is no time, space, or duality at all. It is entirely unconditioned, non-dual, without distinctions. There is no separation, no lack, no suffering, and yet that state is because it is what consciousness arises from. Consciousness is a momentary flicker that arises out of the timeless, absolute source. The body, mind, and world appear within that flicker of consciousness. Consciousness is like a light flashing on and off within the unconditioned, absolute state. In a certain sense, we might say that the absolute is what cognizes the coming and going of consciousness. Just as the world is registered in consciousness, so is consciousness itself registered in the primal space of reality. That is why the absolute is sometimes referred to as the pure awareness that knows consciousness. It is the light behind consciousness. It is the source from which consciousness derives its substance and energy. This source is what the most radical and penetrating presentations of spirituality are pointing to as our fundamental and essential nature. It is not a state or experience because states and experiences only occur after consciousness appears. Our fundamental identity is prior to consciousness. That underlying and ever-present reality is the source which enables consciousness to be conscious and for being to be, so to speak. What is the relationship of consciousness to that prior source, the absolute? When we looked at the relationship of consciousness to its objects, we saw that there really were no separate objects, only consciousness. We can also see that consciousness cannot stand apart from its source as a separate independent reality. This means that consciousness is an expression or modification of the absolute, whatever we may choose to call that. Consciousness, which contains all that appears in dualistic experience, is itself a ripple arising and setting on the timeless, unconditioned, non-dual state, which is our true reality. If consciousness is only a modification of the absolute non-dual reality, then consciousness as such does not truly exist, since it has no actual independent nature. Consciousness appears, but it has never truly existed as an independent reality. All there is the unconditioned, absolute, non-dual source. That absolute reality is all there is, and it is all that we have ever been. There has never been anything else except this. To speak poetically, consciousness is a fleeting ripple on the fathomless ocean of the unconditioned, absolute reality. Consciousness simply arises and sets as a vibration or pulsation of the uncreated and eternal non-dual awareness. In that apparent ripple of consciousness appear universes, worlds, living beings, and everything within the domain of time and space. Yet no thing has ever really come to be, because objects have never existed apart from consciousness, and consciousness has never existed apart from the absolute. That absolute is beyond time, space, body, mind, world, being, and consciousness. This is what your true nature is at this very moment, the absolute unconditioned reality prior to consciousness.